Good evening, councillors, also council officers, members of the public who are welcomed here this evening as well for the May Council meeting, and those that are streaming at home. Hope you're having a nice evening and staying nice and warm. We acknowledge the traditional owners of this land on which we are meeting and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and those from other communities who are here with us today, for they hold the memories, the tradition and the culture of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Item 3 is for apologies and leave of absence. Just a reminder to the community that Councillor Bennett is still on leave and I believe settling in well as a first-time mum. Our CEO Mark Dixon is on leave and we have Deborah Mudra in acting CEO role in his absence. Do we have any other apologies or requests for leave? Thank you, councillors. Item 4, declarations under acts, regulations, codes or local laws. Acting CEO, are there any? No? Thank you. Item 5, declaration by councillors of any conflict of interest. Councillors, Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 8.11.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Watson.
Mr Mayor, on the very rare occasions that I do have a conflict of interest, tonight I do also on 8.11.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillors, thank you. Item 6 is the confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting held back on the 19th of April. Need to be confirmed. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Hall. Second to Councillor Simpfendorfer. Thank you. Item 7 is the delegates' reports, of which there are none. Item 8.1, the review of councillor and mayoral allowances. Acting CEO, I believe there's a correction in the report that's tabled.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just need to make a note for the official record that on page 12 of the agenda, it references the special council meeting of the 12th of May. That is incorrect. The reference should be Friday, the 18th of June at 9:30 a.m, and which is correctly stated in the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting CEO. Councillors, page 8, there is an officer recommendation. Would somebody like to move a motion? Councillor Hall, as per the recommendation, or?
Yes, yep.
Yeah. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Hall.
Okay, under the Local Government Act, councillors are exempt from the conflict of interest requirements that would normally apply to a decision like this. I believe as councillors we should not be voting for our allowances, believe it or not, but it does, because it doesn't seem appropriate to me, but it is a requirement that councillors do vote on this. So I will be supporting this report tonight and that there be no changes to the recommendation. But I'd just like to add, there is one point that I think is worth noting, in that the state government decided last year that there would be no rises to local government councillors' allowances for the 2020-2021 financial year. And, I was definitely okay with this, especially because many of the workers and small businesses or people who'd lost jobs were doing it hard due to the COVID virus lockdowns. But I also believe it should have been across the board with the state politicians' allowances as well, because they actually had a quite substantial pay rise during this time when ours were frozen. So just for a noting.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Watson.
Mr Mayor, very, very clear. It's a Local Government Act requirement, so as the report is put.
Councillors, any further in closing, Councillor Hall? All right, therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 8.2 is the petition based on the animal pound services and options for consideration. The report presents options for the animal pound services and recommends that we enter into agreements with Albury Council for those services. There is an officer recommendation on page 13. Would someone like to move a motion? Thank you, Councillor Hall. Is it as per the recommendation?
Move another motion. Okay, and I'll read it out. The motion is that the pound be upgraded with provision for rehoming pets, a maximum redevelopment budget of 1.5 million, with the budget funds to be redirected from the following: 600,000 from the South Street extension, 120,000 from the Wombat Crossings Vermont Street, 948k in the 221 budget surplus, 39 from the MAV membership costs, and 18,000 from the Goulburn Broken Greenhouse Alliance membership costs. This totals 1.725 million. So that well and truly covers the budget of 1.5 that I have requested.
So, councillors, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Mildren. All right. Councillor Hall.
Okay, let me got some notes here. Okay, after reviewing the report provided to us around the opening of the Wodonga Pound, I found that, in my view, the focus of the report clearly had an agenda that was not to support a pound in Wodonga. I don't believe this reflects our community's expectations around the treatment of our pets. Hundreds of local people signed a petition wanting council to address this issue, but it seems to have been ignored. It fails to recognise that without the Wodonga dog rescue, figures like 92% rehoming rates would, I believe, not be possible. Yet we exploit that figure for our own satisfaction. Wodonga dog rescue have been a big contributor in solving our unwanted pets dilemma in Wodonga for many, many years. Yet we basically offer them nothing in return. The organisation is crying out for help, yet we continue to ignore them. If eventually they fold, we will have a rehoming issue in Wodonga like no other, and this could result in many local pets being euthanased needlessly. Regulations are different on either side of the border, which amounts to an extra paperwork and process for organisations like the dog rescue. This is being created because we have our pets impounded in New South Wales. For the Wodonga dog rescue to take unwanted dogs or cats out of the existing pound, they actually pay a monetary fee to do so. So on so many levels, this organisation is treated poorly. They are run by volunteers and donated money. Every pet taken by the Wodonga dog rescue adds to the council's lovely rehoming figures. Wodonga dog rescue apparently rehome around 40 pets per month, I believe. I did a little research of my own, and out of 9 councils that were similar to Wodonga Council, we have the highest registration costs of all of them, on average $10 more per registration, and most of these councils provide in-house pounds. Why are registrations so high? I'm told the revenue received by council pays for 4 rangers, their cars, overheads, also a contract fee to the pound services, and a $4.10 per animal registration fee goes to the state government. I question the need for 4 full-time rangers for the animal management. We receive 469,000 in pet revenue registrations, going up to a projected 477 in the new draft budget. I know for a fact the rangers do other work, so why are our pet registrations don't drop to reflect the cost to council? When the first contract service was put out, councils were charging full de-sex rates of $49 to $50, and this is expected to rise to $53 in the new draft budget. The costings really don't add up to me. Albury Council's registrations are a one-off $60 for a fee for registration for a de-sex pet. This is set by the New South Wales State Government. How I see it is that they need us to be contracting our services to them and that of other councils to take some of the cost burdens from their budget. This is a great result for them. And I also might add that noted in the Border Mail dated the 19th of the 6th, 2020, that with the new Albury Pound providing pound services to other councils like Wodonga, the net cost to Albury would be annually $40,000. Yet our annual management fee to them is projected to be $120,000 per annum. It states in the report if this deal is to go ahead. I believe pet registrations are too high for what we receive, and I believe the revenue we receive would cover our operational costs for a pound going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Mildren.
Reserve, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much, Councillor Hall, for providing us with the results of your extensive research. I would like to say a few things on the matter. I would like firstly to thank the council staff for providing us with the report on the issue that is full of figures and has a number of options and arguments for and against various options. What I think of everything I have heard and read about it, the estimated capital cost of building and upgrading a new pound, as per the report we have been given, is around 1.8 to 2 million. It would hurt me immensely to put this amount into the budget. However, there are things that would hurt me even more. One of the arguments in support of the current recommendation to use the services of Albury Pound was, I quote, meet government resource sharing ideals. Trust me please, it's not because I was born in the USSR that I sometimes have problems with sharing government ideals. My reasons are purely practical. According to the report, we can see currently we are paying a private provider who is servicing us from the premises of the Albury Pound 59,000 net per annum. The proposed payment to Albury Council to run the service for us from Albury Council is 120,000 per annum. In other words, we will be paying 61,000 extra per year. Wodonga pet owners, as I believe has been already mentioned by Councillor Hall, pay a registration every year for every pet. I know that for a fact. I have a 17-year-old cat who was a kitten when I got it a couple of months after I got to Australia. She's been through my journey with me, so I don't grudge my payment, but I know people have lots of furry friends and pay the registration every year. And as Councillor Hall also has mentioned, I actually noticed that we have a few arguments that cross, that Albury pet owners pay once per pet. Albury will have a new pound on their soil and Wodonga will not. There will be anomalies in registration requirements between Victoria and New South Wales, which will add to the multiple obstacles in the way of rehoming. With a facility of our own, we could potentially service our Victorian neighbours, who I imagine find it inconvenient to go to Albury for rehoming dogs. After going through the budget, I have identified a number of expenses that could be better allocated towards upgrading and running the Wodonga Pound. I have a list here. I don't know if I have the time to go through it. I noticed that some of the items do repeat. I know that there is 60,000 extra that we'll be paying to Albury, but that's towards running cost. There is $50,000 included in the budget for CEO consultancy fees for scoping and design of new council plan actions. There is 10,000, that's not much, but it adds up. There is 10,000 in presentation and gifts. That is up from 2,000 to 12,000 compared to last year. And that is for employee reward and recognition program. I'm all for employee reward and recognition program. However, the same budget has 417,000 allocated to staff development, 100,000 allocated to health and well-being. I think we could probably spare the little 10,000 towards the pound. I concur with the redundancy of the membership, 39,000 with MAV. I also think we could possibly lose 18,000 membership towards Goulburn Broken Greenhouse Alliance. We have 20,000 sitting in planning and building consultancy fees just as a general provision. We propose that we could spend 120,000 to Cube commercial kitchen upgrade, which I think could wait, or actually we could possibly do without. We have allocated 600,000 towards South Street extension, which I don't believe we need. We, according to a March financial report, had 580,000 in cash surplus. We have allocated 130,000 in total towards various community impact grants, which I believe our dog rescue could meet on many occasions. 35,000 towards infrastructure grants, 35,000 towards community impact grants, 45,000 towards community partnership grants, 15,000 towards sponsorship. Okay, and there is a Wombat crossing in the Vermont Street, I believe, where the hospital is. I think we have enough expenses which we could possibly reallocate towards both capital and running expenses of the pound, and possibly scratch up some more to put back in the ratepayers' pockets in not raising the fees. But that's the discussion for the budget item, not for the pound item. Lastly, but not least, I believe there is a great demand and desperation in the community for having a pound, and I would like to repeat, while I'm all for saving money and for helping our ratepayers in these difficult times post-COVID, I believe we could afford and we should be able to relook at the budget to afford the pound in Wodonga. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Watson.
Mr Mayor, I foreshadow another motion if not successful.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpfendorfer, anything to add before?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. It's obviously very topical, and the paper that's been provided did come up with those three options that have been mentioned, and you know that they did arise out of the petition, which is great. I went right through the petition, and while some of it did concern me that there was only about 16% that were from the local area, there was quite a larger number from overseas and interstate and all that. That aside, it was well over, or just over 15% that were from Wodonga and Albury that have signed that petition. But despite that, I looked into my own research as well around shared services and what this means for our city. And look, I just struggle to reach, I understand the amount of work that's done by those at Wodonga Rescue, and I've been involved with that to a point where I have taken a dog myself. It didn't quite work out, but the work that goes in there, the figures around, I just heard from Councillor Hall, you know, is of a concern. If that's the level of what's been done by Wodonga Rescue, ironically, as it's the week of the volunteer, well, they need some support with volunteers to help them with that. I'm not sure whether in this environment, in this budget term, is the right time for such a decision to support a pound when, if it comes back to, if it isn't broke, with the return rate over 92%, I take on board the comments made by, are these inflated because of the work the rescue do? Then maybe that's the issue we need to be looking at, rather than such a significant impact onto the budget for a service that's quite shared, and many councils do that. We are two cities, one community. Many people live and work on either side of the border. I just don't quite think I'm there yet with what's been moved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Meldrum.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think we've learnt from our community that a pound and animal services and all those things that go with it have become one of the most important components of our community. We as council, in other aspects of what we do, hold pets in relatively high regard, and by that, pet owners in relatively high regard, by providing a whole range of other services. Yet the one thing that probably is the most important part, if your pet goes missing or if somebody opens the gate and lets it out, we don't have local services to deal with it. Pound services are a local service. They are not a regional service per se. Doesn't mean you can't provide a bit of service to the neighbouring councils in certain times, but fundamentally I see it as a local service, and we have massive demand. One of the most highly spoken about things during the last year's election process with me was what we were going to do in relation to the dogs and cats in Wodonga, both from the point of view of our animal services management and the services associated with pounds and things that come out of that. So from that point of view, I support the motion that's been put, and when we talk about what the cost of it's going to be, I am gobsmacked at the amount of money that's been put up in our officer report in relation to it. We can build a very substantial house in Wodonga for about, say, $500,000 or maybe less. To build a building not of that size and to renovate a building which in total might be just bigger than that house is not going to cost us 4 times that amount to do. That's just overreach. I just don't see how that works. And anybody who knows me know I work in the industry as well, so I've got a little bit of background about how that stuff fits together, and I just think that's an overreach. Even if it's double the price of what a house is, it's still less than, you know, almost half of what our staff are suggesting the cost to do it will be. So I don't think this is such an onerous thing, and I think we have an obligation to our community to be doing the pound services, and this motion seeks to achieve that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall, anything in closing?
Look, just that I'm in the construction industry and have been for over 30 years, and I concur with Councillor Mildren's views on the construction cost side of things for the pound. It just, you know, it really blows me. And we've done some commercial work in the past over the years, so, you know, I've sort of got some idea of what costs are required with building, and I don't concur with the figures that have been put in this report. Also, too, it notes about councils working together for combined services. I don't see that as a problem so much in like metropolitan areas or other Victorian councils working together, but we've got different regulations, different rules, and it makes it quite difficult. And I've spoken with the Wodonga Dog Rescue, and they said they've got paperwork, you know, sitting there that they have to deal with all the time just so they can take a dog over and abide by the legislation, because it's different in New South Wales and there's different requirements in Victoria. So, you know, it's not simplistic, and to say otherwise makes it, you know, a bit of a mockery of it, really.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. If I can, I've just got a couple of clarifying questions I'd like to ask Deputy CEO, if possible. First of all, of that list of figures, and this may not be yours to answer, it might be one to refer to Narelle Klein, our Director of Finance and Systems. Of those figures listed, are they accurate in the motion? Yeah, thanks, Officer Klein. We'll get us the motion in front of you. Thank you.
So the numbers in the motion do look like the numbers that we have in our budget for those items. I think as far as the development costs, so Councillor Schultz, Officer Schultz might be able to provide some insight into the construction costs.
Thank you. Leon?
Mr. Mayor, I think it's fair to say that not having undertaken any planning, having any specifications drawn up, not having bought a pound in the past, having had no prior experience, the budget allocation figures that we have in the report are conservative. But as I may have mentioned in the course of the last couple of days, I would rather put a conservative figure in front of the council than one that is optimistic and seek further funds in due course. However, we believe those costs are realistic, be they conservative, and I'm quite happy to stay with those numbers as set out within the report.
Thank you, Director. And also, Acting CEO, just in terms of the operational impact to council plan and what have you, those items that have been listed as a subtraction from the budget, are there any areas of concern there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would have to refer to Officer Schultz around the Wombat crossing Vermont Street, the 120 Ks there. The MAB membership costs of $39,000 K, I think would impact on certainly the services within council that do rely on MAV for policy and funding advocacy and for the support that they give some of those services. And the Goulburn Broken Greenhouse Alliance membership, I'd probably have to refer also to Officer Schultz around the importance of that, but I do know that we do have membership to that, and that certainly helps us in terms of some of our obligations for climate change.
Mr Mayor, the Vermont Street crossing is between the car park and the hospital. It is a safety concern that has been raised by the hospital and their patients. And $120,000 is required to construct this particular crossing, which will include all the necessary lighting, signage, painting as per the Vic Roads regulations. With regard to the Goulburn Barry, the GBGA, as the Deputy CEO has enunciated, we are members of the GBGA, and it's probably our only source to reliable climate change information. Ultimately, Mr Mayor, that's a decision for the council to make.
Thank you, Director. And thanks, Acting CEO. Councillors, I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Once again, councillors, I refer to the point that Clause 67 of Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules states that in the event of a tied vote, the Chair must exercise a casting vote. The vote is tied at 3 apiece. I'll exercise the casting vote by voting against. Therefore, the motion is defeated. Councillors, in that case, Councillor Hall? Division? Okay, so all those in favour? We have Councillor Quilty, Councillor of the motion, sorry Graham. All those in favour, Councillor Quilty, Councillor Mildred, Councillor Hall. All those against, Councillor Watson, Councillor Simpfendorfer, Councillor Polton. The casting vote went with Councillor Polton to defeat the motion. Therefore, councillors, I look for a motion. And Councillor Watson, I do know that you foreshadowed.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I will put the motion that was in tonight's agenda, the recommendation on page 14, I believe it is. And the reason doing so is that I understand my passionate colleagues putting up the earlier motion, but that was without us knowledge, and there was a lot of changes in the budget for that. And therefore, I believe we have a very good system in the sense that good pet ownership isn't much of a concern. It's the poor pet ownership, or who may not have Oh, right, yeah.
Councillor Simpfendorfer, carry on, Councillor.
Sorry about that, Mr Mayor, but the good pet owners, they're tagged, or microchip, I should say, and they're returned to their owners. I want the best for all our animals in Albury, Wodonga, in this region, and to have the best possible service, which I believe is in this report for our furry friends. I walk every day, Mr Mayor, and I meet a lot of furry friends and their owners, and not once have they complained to me about what services we have with it and what the pound issues are. So I believe with what Councillor Simpfendorfer said earlier about the number of local people compared in the petition, it's a lot of external people as well speaking in that. So I'm really wanting to hear from our local people, and I'd like to put the motion as what's on the record.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll reserve the right. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Mildred.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There are many things about this matter that concern me, not least of which is the extraordinarily partisan nature of the information presented to Council. Clearly, the operational arm of Council does not want to provide pound and rehoming services in Wodonga. The estimated redevelopment costs, as I mentioned earlier, to bring the old existing building up to standard is an overstatement, to say the least, with an entire new dwelling being constructed for less than $500,000 and renovation of a 200 square metre extension to an existing facility cannot reasonably cost 4 times. The report makes scant reference to state laws between New South Wales and Victoria being different. Irrespective as to what may have been happening under the current arrangements, I am not convinced that we can be legally compliant with both states' legislation, particularly in respect to animal registration requirements for impoundment, release and for rehoming. Additionally, I am given to understand that there are even differences in the microchipping systems and the rules across the 2 states. I understand that the New South Wales law provides that dogs must be kept for 14 days. In Victorian law prescribes 8 days. One might ask whose laws apply, but the answer is clear. When in New South Wales law applies. Who pays the additional time impoundment costs? Rhetorical question. If the pound and release point is in New South Wales, how can animals be released in Vic Rego or for rehoming on release and comply with New South Wales animal registration legislation? The answer is that they can't, or if they do, then the registration in each state might be necessary. Who pays the animal owners if collecting their impounded animal, or perhaps Wodonga Dog Rescue pay? This matter is far greater than simple economic efficiency. It creates community angst and is a basic locally rather than regionally provided service, expectation and requirement by our community. Most dog rehoming is presently done by Wodonga Dog Rescue, and we even charge a fee to them for rehoming the dogs, which I think is way over the top. It's a service they're providing to us as a volunteer agency, and we even charge them to do it. I'm led to believe that Albury residents are not happy with the current pound in Albury, so Albury City needs to, and I believe have decided to build a new facility, and it seems very convenient for Wodonga to be part and to amortise some of the redevelopment costs. This is economics prioritised over community expectations and service delivery. Wodonga dog rego fees are high compared to other Victorian councils already. We will be paying $120,000 proposed budget amount for the services by Albury City. Do we have to pay vet fees on top of the arrangement with Albury City? Do we have to pay extra to euthanise unwanted dogs? The answer to the last 2 questions is unknown until the CEO negotiates a contract arrangement under the motion that we have before us, and the arrangements do not need to be brought back to council meeting for a decision. The report indicates $120,000 plus cost of ranges, and we anticipate a $477,000 in animal rego receipts in next year's budget. So if we have 4 full-time animal rangers, and I do not believe we have 4 full-time rangers, I understand some of their time is allocated to duties other than animal management matters, that equates to about $114,000+ per ranger. This sounds like another waste management levy overcharge. In my opinion, if the majority position is to proceed with the motion before us, then the CEO should not be authorised to enter the agreement. The draft agreement should be brought back for final council review and decision. However, I acknowledge that the CEO already has the authority to negotiate and enter the agreement with Albury Council up to an expenditure of $200,000 under the present delegation of authority to the CEO, which arguably makes that part of the motion irrelevant. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Quilty? You're right, okay. Councillor Hall?
Just a couple of things to add. So there's a question. What does happen to the dogs and cats on the weekend? We don't have rangers working on weekends. You know who picks them up? The Wodonga Dog Rescue. You know? Also, we did hear from local people. We heard from 230, we had like a petition and it was something like, well, 1,500 people. Many of those were from around Australia, some from even overseas. But I did some calculations and there was, and I think they added on more to that later on, but I don't know if that was tabled. But there was 230 people in Wodonga and 74 people from Albury that thought that we needed a pound in Wodonga. Yet we use 551 people in our consultation processes for our council plan. So to say that you didn't hear from the local people, you know, that's just, you know, not true. over 35% of Albury residents were unhappy with the existing pound conditions, and 50% didn't think it met expectations. That's why they're building a new pound and taking it off the contractor. But, you know, we have heard from our people, and they have been crying out for a long time, and we need to listen. And it's about time we did.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we can tell, it's quite an emotive issue. It's a difficult one. I take the points that Councillor Mildren's raised. It's the cross-jurisdiction stuff, as I well know, is complex, and perhaps this is matters for the cross-border commissioner to again try and to look at. But the paper before us is about what three options we have to better service this issue of a pound in Wodonga or a shared service. Being a layperson in the industry, I understand what some of our colleagues have said about housing costs, and this doesn't add up. I've got to take the advice of the director. Housing costs are a separate issue to a layperson. I just see that if you're in a position where you're building hundreds of houses, of course your costs are down. This is a one-off build for a pound. I've got to take the director's advice on what those figures are, and he's quite clear saying he stands by those. So I don't accept the issue of housing costs versus a one-off commercial build. That's just my view, having not been in the industry, as I said. As I said, the success that's been raised on how do we measure success of our pound and the community expectations is difficult, because we've just heard tonight some of those figures about without the Wodonga dog rescue, a lot of these pets go to them to pick up on the weekend. Again, are they issues that we need to be looking at as opposed to the servicing of it? So I don't know those answers, but in relation to what's the table of the report that is before us, the numbers are there, and the numbers suggest that 92% of them are being rehomed. That's 5% higher than other like councils, and it's over 10% higher than the state average. Now, who's causing that? Maybe that needs greater discussion, but this is a matter for this budget, and I'm just not there at the moment to support anything other than the recommendation that's before us.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Watson in closing.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just think that with some of the comments about the consultation we had with the council plan, is that I sat in many of those consultation meetings, and very rare. I don't think at any of those occasions that the pound was raised. So I am listening to my fellow colleagues saying, yes, it is a very passionate, a very issue that is very close to the heart with a lot of people, but I don't believe the majority of our community are out there wanting it. I think it's the week of the volunteer, or I think, if it raises one thing is getting some more volunteers to help dog rescue and all these other things, but agreeing with what Councillor Simpleton said, what's before us and what is for our budget process this year, I believe this is the best option for us to go.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillors, I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All opposed? Once again, we have a tied vote. Therefore, I will vote for the motion. Therefore, the motion is carried. Division, thank you. All those in favour? Sorry, Councillor Watson. Livy, you threw me off. Councillor Watson, Councillor Polton, Councillor Simpfendorfer. All those against? Councillor Quilty, Councillor Mildren, Councillor Hall. Assuming you definitely didn't want that in the division, and carrying vote with the casting vote of the Mayor. Thank you very much. On to item 8.3. Council plan and budget items, where councillors have a conflict of interest. Now, councillors heading into this evening, I haven't been made aware of any amongst any of us. Is that still the case? Thank you. If that's the case, we can move on to the next item, which is 8.4, the Draft Council Plan 2021 to 2025, the Wodonga 2033 Revisited Community Vision. Page 4 of 383 of your table documents, and Acting CEO, if you could just read the recommendation that's found there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the Draft Council Plan 2021 to 2025 and the Wodonga 2033 Revisited Community Vision be endorsed for a 28-day public exhibition period, and A report on the feedback from the public exhibition period be submitted to the council meeting scheduled for June 28, 2021.
Thank you very much, Acting CEO. All right, councillors, would somebody like to move a motion? Councillor Simpfendorfer, as per the recommendation. Yeah, do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
No, Mr Mayor, I think the report's very thorough. As it is, it's important for the community to have that 28-day consultation period, and I'd encourage everyone to get in, have a look and put in their feedback by that due date. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Watson.
I'd just like to thank all the public that did come along to our consultation periods to bring this this document to us for tonight. I look forward to going out to public consultation or public review again and bringing it back to us, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Mildren, I think you're first, yeah?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On Friday afternoon, a late items document was provided to councillors about the new council plan and the Wodonga 2033 plan, amongst a few other things, as prepared originally in 2008. The late information comprised some 383 pages, and in due diligence there is no way it can be adequately read in the available time by any of our council. In short, the draft council plan is little different to each of the 4-year council plans since 2008, fundamentally focused on delivery of the 2033 plan. In reality, the current councillors have had little material input. Staff prepare the 4-year council plan and present it to a council meeting for adoption. Whilst the form and presentation of the plan is very well done, the plan content largely comprises sloganistic few-word statements and broad-sweeping single-sentence statements that generally may be interpreted to mean all things to all people and are essentially politically correct. It is difficult to mount an argument against the foundations of the plan until it comes to interpretation for implementation, where the devil is in the agenda. Some of the agenda is set by state government, but much of it depends upon interpretation of adopted policies, council staff's philosophy, partisan alignments and life's experiences. Generally, implementation of the plan is an operational matter, essentially beyond the reach of councillors who must not have involvement in operational matters. From my perspective, the council plan and health and wellbeing plan reflect the left side of politics agenda, are politically correct rather than substantive, reflect narrow views of our community and are generally partisan in predetermined target programs and implementation outcomes. And for those reasons, Mr Mayor, I will not support the document.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall, I recall you had your hand up in there too.
The draft council plan, in my view, is just a rehash of the prior year's council plans. Some of it would be still relevant. Yes, I agree with that. But as an elected council, I feel we really did have very limited input into the final document. Although some will say this is a community document reflecting our community, what our community members want. We had, as reported or in the document, it was 450 people participated in our community consultations, either via workshops, online or in our pop-up shop front. This, as I said before, is about 1% of the population of a population of around 44,000. Sadly, it is not many, considering the council's effort in providing these opportunities for our communities to have a say and give their feedback. And it does seem to be the same organisations and people that do take the time to participate. Some might see this as our community is satisfied with what the council are doing, and I'm sure this is the case in some areas. But I do get plenty of feedback that says otherwise. They feel they don't get listened to and therefore have given up in giving any feedback or being part of any consultation process. As the council, we need to really look at how we can do this better and take on board and find new ways to engage and encourage our community. We seem to be doing the same things time and time again. I know it's not easy. Listening to 1% of our community is not what I call true engagement. And I actually had a phone call today from an elderly gentleman who would he end up talking about his feedback, and he doesn't use internet, and he doesn't participate. He doesn't hardly know what's going on in as far as they used to have the city life that he doesn't get. So, you know, there are those element of those people that do miss out in providing their feedback, and they're pretty important because some of these people, you know, we're having our population is there's a large percentage of older people in our population, and getting them to participate and in giving their feedback is an effort because of their lack of ability with, you know, internet or just getting around. So I think that's an area we probably need to look at. And it's also like, as I said before, you know, our PAN services, you know, hundreds of people told us their thoughts on this, and yet we continue to ignore them and have done for many years. Lobby groups, I believe, tend to get more of a say, especially when it fits with the Council Plan agenda. So this question to me arises, who really is deciding our community's future? Because I don't believe 1% is a good reflection, and I don't feel like I really had a lot of input into it either. So,
Councillor Quilty, before I go to Councillor Watson in close, sorry, was it what's Simpfendorfer? Sorry, in closing, did you have anything to add?
I wasn't actually going to, but I will now. Thanks for asking. First of all, I would like to thank the council officers for all the work they put into the report. It is indeed very well presented and it is easy to read. Secondly, I would like to thank the council officers for the immense effort they put into organizing those community engagement workshops. As a first-time councillor, it was a very, even though I didn't visit them all due to work and family commitments, the ones I did attend were a good opportunity for me as a new councillor. I will not be supporting the recommendation tonight. That's not the reflection of what council officers have put in the report. That is the reflection of my thoughts of how it should be done. I know I will be repeating my colleagues, but I will still say that it saddened me to see what a small part of the community participated and gave their input. I wonder why. I hope it's not because they feel there is no use in saying anything. But what I would really like to do, and I know we had workshops and briefings, but it is a council plan. It is our document. And what I would really like to see in creating this document is councillors, unrestricted by code of conduct, to be able to engage with the community and talk honestly and openly about things they like and things they do not like and things they would like to add, and create a plan that is truly our own. Thank you.
Councillor Simpfendorfer in closing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The workshops that were mentioned before, I attended, if not all of them are from memory, I think we've had more than enough opportunities, councillors, to contribute to the plan. I certainly know I did, and put my feelings forward. It is very disappointing that there's only 1% engagement. I guess it's very difficult to not walk this to every door in town, and we're relying on people to be engaged with us. The comms team that runs social media, that media here tonight to report. People do read the paper, they do watch the news, they are invested in this. It is disappointing to only have 1%, and we should be looking to get that up. You could make an argument either way, as was mentioned, that are people happy enough with what's going on? But we're hearing time and time again that people are coming to the councils, they're not happy. So that's an onus on us. But I think, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't in this situation. The council plan, whilst from what I'm hearing around the table, was, you know, it's not agreed to, and there's no submissions put forward by us. I tend to disagree. We had an opportunity to do that. And in this environment, through the last 18, almost 24 months of what we've gone through as a nation, as a globe, I feel you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If we were to come up, if a council plan was to come up with all these visions, I would argue we may have been smacked for that as well. I like the plan. I think it addresses all the issues that we need to as a community. And as I said, with everything we've gone through with bushfires and border closures and COVID, I think it's a very responsible plan that we need to address all those issues. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillors, I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? I'll exercise the casting vote to carry. The Mayor's vote will carry that motion. Looking for the division. Thank you very much. All those in favour? Councillor Watson, Simpfendorfer and Polton. All those against? Almost got you into the all those in favour, Ron. Councillor Mildred, Councillor Hall and Councillor Quilty, carried by the Mayor. Thank you very much. 8.5. So our draft budget 2021 to 2022. Acting CEO, if you could read the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the draft budget 2021 to 2022 as tabled and initialled by the chairperson for identification be the budget prepared by Council for the purposes of Section 94(1) of the Local Government Act 2020, the Act, and be endorsed for a 28-day public exhibition period. 2, the fees and charges schedule be included as part of the draft 2021-2022 budget. And 3, a report on the feedback from the public exhibition period be submitted to the council meeting scheduled for June 28, 2021.
Narelle Klein, Director of Finance and Systems, I know this is your biggest piece of work for the year. Would you like to give us a preamble on what I guess some of the highlights in there are?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. This is the first budget that's been prepared under the new Local Government Act 2020. So as a result, you will see some changes in the documents. Firstly, what we did have was a strategic resource plan, has now been replaced by the financial plan 2021 to 22 through to 2030 to 2031. The financial plan is part of the new integrated planning framework and provides a 10-year financially sustainable projection regarding how the actions of the council plan may be funded to achieve the community vision. The financial plan is fiscally responsible, showing annual operating surpluses and with sufficient cash reserves maintained over the 10 years. Secondly, there are now 4-year projections included in the annual budget document, covering planned capital works expenditure and human resources expenditure, including additional human resources information to reflect the changes required from the implementation of the Gender Equality Act 2020. Both of these documents show that Council is in a strong financial position as it heads into the new financial year, following what has been a very challenging year with volatile economic conditions. This is the first budget for the newly elected Council. Due to there not being an existing council plan adopted for the 2021 to 2022 financial year, the budget has been prepared on a business as usual basis using conservative assumptions. At the end of March, councillors were provided with a comprehensive budget pack that included a budget overview of how the pack had been compiled, with draft budget information, including the draft 10-year financial statements, capital budget, fees and charges schedule and annual operating budgets by business unit. In April, 4 budget workshops were booked in for councillors to go through the budget pack and ask any questions they had and request financial modelling of alternate scenarios prior to the draft budget being finalised. At the conclusion of the workshops, the draft budget documents presented here have been compiled based on the versions of the draft financial information provided to councillors and also updated for recent council resolutions that had a financial implication. Some of the key points to highlight in the budget are the rates and charges. This budget tabled at the May Council meeting contains a 1.5% rate rise in line with the state government rate cap announced in December. There is a net increase of $9.90 or 3% per residential ratepayer and curbside collections and general waste charges combined, which is aligned to the expected costs of providing waste services to the municipality. The overall change in rates and charges combined will result in an increase of $1.01 per week to the average ratepayer. Rates and charges for the average residential ratepayer in the 2021 to 2022 budget are $2,010.83. This is $24.72 less than the average residential rates and charges in the 2016-2017 year. Council plan priorities were unknown at the time of preparing the budget. Whilst we now have a draft council plan, we wait for the plan to be adopted in June to identify the top priorities that require funding in the 21-22 budget. Provision of $500,000 has been set aside in the Executive Services budget for this purpose. It will be used to fund the delivery or the detailed planning and design of larger priorities once they are known, to ensure they are shovel-ready for any grant funding opportunities. Council is budgeting for a full program of capital works totalling $23.1 million. This includes $6.8 million of capital renewal works on Council's existing infrastructure assets, $6.5 million for the purchase of the Council depot, should the option to purchase be exercised at a later date by Council, $1.2 million for the conversion of major roads, street lighting to LED. This project has an excellent return on investment and has an estimated payback period of less than 5 years. In addition, Council will look to rebudget approximately $14 million of capital projects from the 20 to 21 financial year. Whilst this seems like a very large amount, there are over $2 million in successful late stimulus grants announced in recent months that were not able to be delivered until the 21-22 financial year, together with $7 million relating to the unavoidable delays from the identification of the endangered Sloane's froglet at Barranduda Fields. Some other capital projects have also encountered a lack of availability of contractors and or materials as a result of COVID-related delays. It is considered extremely important that these projects continue to provide much-needed stimulus to the local economy. Operating budgets by business unit have been prepared based on existing levels of service being maintained. These budgets have only incorporated cost increases where there is a contractual requirement for a CPI increase. Council staff have been particularly frugal by maintaining budgets at last year's amounts or less wherever possible. Council's borrowings continue to be paid down and are regarded by the Victorian Auditor General as being low risk. There is provision for new borrowings of $4 million should the option to purchase the depot be exercised by councillors during the year. This will be subject of a council resolution at a future council meeting, and if the purchase does not proceed, the borrowings will not be required. There is a compelling business case that supports the depot purchase, with an estimated rate of return on the investment being approximately 8%, with loan repayments equivalent to the annual lease payments already included in the operating budget. Any borrowings would be paid off in approximately 15 years, creating an ongoing cash windfall for a future council from that point onwards. This is a sensible and fiscally responsible investment to consider. Regarding the impact of COVID-19, it should be noted that if any periods of service shutdowns or restrictions reoccur in the 21-22 year, budget variations will be put forward to reflect those changes as the year unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And I'm looking for a motion. I know your hand eagerly went up before, Councillor Quilty. I'm going to give you the honours because no one else has pushed you over for them. All right, away you go.
Sorry. Thank you very much. I would like to put an alternative motion up. I move that a decision on the budget be adjourned and that this meeting be reconvened in respect to the budget item only at 10 a.m. tomorrow, 18th of May. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mildren. Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I would like to thank Officer Klein and her team for creating this draft budget document. It was a very well prepared document. It was easy to navigate, almost a pleasure to read. And all the questions that I ever had have been answered. Extensive information has been provided to answer all my questions. I believe that it's a big and serious document that requires a lot more discussion than we can afford tonight. Tonight is a very busy and controversial agenda. I also have a few points to make. I do not want to support the rate rise. I believe that we have some expenses I won't take you through the list again, that would be better allocated. And I believe that each and every councillor, it would be fair that each and every councillor gets a meaningful opportunity to debate specific items sought to be introduced or removed from the budget. Thank you.
Councillor Mildren.
Reserve, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Sorry, can I just get a clarification on the motion that was put? I didn't quite miss the second part, something about 10 a.m. tomorrow, and I guess yeah.
Thank you. I move that we adjourn the decision on the budget item and that this meeting be reconvened in respect to the budget item only at 10 a.m. tomorrow, 18th of May. In other words, that we come here again at 10 a.m. tomorrow to debate the budget item by item. Thank you.
Just a question then through you, Mr Mayor, to, I'm not sure who would be the most appropriate. Out of the workshops that we had, how many questions or alterations were made through those workshops? Because I know we're offered many opportunities, and I'll be very, very cautious to not be too critical, but I think we've had adequate time to work through the budget and ask questions. How many, I haven't asked any, I know that. I just wanted around the table, is that an appropriate question to ask? Because I'm not sure what we're going to achieve by 10 o'clock tomorrow. Well, that hasn't been already afforded to us.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Director Narelle Klein.
So I haven't got the number of questions in front of me, but there was minimal questions asked. We were asked to provide some modelling on rate rises and the impact of what a zero rate rise would mean to council's ongoing revenue. But there were very few requests in relation to some of the operating expenses that we had in the budget. Generally, the operating expenses for services, we try not to drill down into that operational level too much. It's more councillors need to look at that more strategic, providing that we're delivering the services at the level that we've agreed to through previous council plans and community engagement.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Mildren.
Mr Mayor, I reserve, but there is a point of clarification in response to the question that I think is important. We're misconstruing and crossing things, and even some stuff that Officer Klein referenced earlier. It's one thing to ask questions in a budget and in a workshop process, but the Act explicitly does not allow decisions to be made or for officers to be influenced by councillor requests. It must not happen, and we know that, and it's very clear under the legislation. So we can ask all the questions under the sun and get all the answers, and tonight is the point where these are to be debated, or tomorrow if the motion gets up. This is where the items that are raised in the budget are to be debated, and that is a specific thing under the new Local Government Act as said by Officer Klein earlier.
Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Clarification then. So if this motion does get up at 10 o'clock tomorrow, what will be different that we can debate or can't debate that hasn't already been undertaken? How do we see tomorrow 10 a.m. working?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for your indulgence in letting this happen. Fundamentally, it is a formal council meeting tomorrow. It's a continuation of tonight's council meeting. So with a continuation of tonight's council meeting, we can suspend standing orders, for example, one example, we could suspend standing orders and we could go through any of the things that any individual councillor would like to raise as an alternative approach to the budget or an alternative inclusion to the budget or any variations on that theme. Or we could do it now if that's what was chosen to be done, but I suggest we might be here for a long time if we were.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. I know your hand was coming up before. Councillor Watson.
Mr Mayor, thank you. I'll foreshadow another motion should this fail. However, I do like to point out that, and I know, Councillor Mildren, we cannot debate in briefings, But we had a briefing this morning that 3 of our councillors in this room were absent at. So even an email in saying that you might foreshadow this was going to occur would have been appropriate and helpful for us. I also would ask the question of having a meeting we have to advertise, or do we have to have notice of motion of some time for a new motion or a new council meeting, and it'll be a meeting of extraordinary meeting. So hence I think, unfortunately, we've been hit with a sledgehammer at the last hour when we had the 4th opportunity to have information at a budget workshops. It wasn't required because I believe that everyone was happy with what was occurring and how the process was going. So with that in mind, with that said, Mr. Mayor, I foreshadow should this motion not get up.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Hall.
In the past, I have supported draft budgets to go out, even though there were items in them that, that I didn't support or, didn't agree with. But look, in the past, we had far more input, I believe, into the budget. This time around, I just felt like we had nothing. I went to all the budget workshops, bar I think one. But, ultimately I would have liked to have been able to pull some stuff out and... but I didn't feel, we're not in the position to be able to do that. And so we're left with the council meeting to actually address those issues.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Director Klein, just want to clarify the timelines, if we can, thanks, in terms of, so we've had our budget workshops. Ordinarily the process would be that a budget is modelled. There probably is some room there in that time period to be able to go back and forward between what would happen if we did this or what would happen if we did that. And then it goes to public consultation, which is essentially what the recommendation from officers were. And people can submit, is that correct, in terms of the community can engage? I know we've heard that conversation tonight. The community can engage and suggest things they may not want to see or they would like to see.
Yes, that's correct. So this is a draft budget that's going out for public exhibition. So there is the opportunity for community members to make a submission against the budget. We have the opportunity to make changes to this budget when we adopt or we bring the paper up for adoption at the June meeting. Obviously, anything that's substantial that is considered to be changed in the budget that would have an ongoing impact, we would want to be able to model that up with plenty of time to make sure that we weren't placing council in a financially unsustainable position when it came to our financial plan over the 10 years. We certainly, through the budget workshops we had with councillors, there was plenty of opportunity for councillors to ask questions, ask for things to be modelled up. We were asking for councillors' input on many occasions, and
Mr. Mayor, the first part about asking questions, I believe, is correct, but the bit about councillors individually asking for something to be modelled up or councillors collectively making a decision in a briefing or workshop is in breach of the Act, and we cannot do it, and we have not been doing it, not in my presence anyway. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to decline that one only because, Councillor Mildred, I'm pretty certain, if my memory serves me correct, you asked what the modelling scenario would be for each incremental rate rise or decrease. Was it not yourself, Councillor Mildred? Okay. Thank you, Director Klein. I think you've covered off the question that I asked anyway. Thank you very much. Councillor Mildred.
Thank you. In response to Councillor Watson, in essence, we've asked, or the motion asks for an adjournment of this meeting. So in that context, it's not another meeting and it doesn't need to be publicly given notice of, etc., etc. And I guess the other point that I was going to make in response is that there's only one place available for debate and decision-making under the new Local Government Act, and that's in this or these council meetings. And for councillors to come to a council meeting with a predetermined position is actually a breach of the Act. So if a councillor sends out a motion, then that's giving evidence and giving an indication of a predetermined position. And that would be a breach of the Act, in my opinion. And I think if we're going to be saying, oh, no, we can't have a surprise or anything like that, well, then we can't actually openly debate things. We can't actually take things to task around this table, which is where we are required to do the debate. So I disagree with Councillor Watson in regard to that. It's just, you know, foreshadowing stuff. If that's the only reason that something is to be opposed, then I think it's a pretty poor reason. In terms of the opportunity, I see this motion as providing an opportunity for the things that individual councillors might have wanted to have in the budget that hasn't made it into the budget for whatever reasons, an opportunity for the councillors to actually argue the point and have a debate about what should be in and what shouldn't be in. I don't see it as a mechanism of fundamentally changing the outcome. I see it as a mechanism of changing the things that get included in and things that need to go out to balance it out. I think that's the responsible way that we should be doing business. So I don't see it as impacting adversely, and I concur with Officer Klein in the fact that that's the way the budget has to be done. We shouldn't be creating problems at the last minute where we have to recalibrate everything that goes right through. But that doesn't mean that we can't come and put projects in and take projects out, or put recurrent costs in and take recurrent costs out, or change the services that we might want to have delivered and take something out and put other services back in. And that's what we should be debating, and that's what we should be doing as councillors. I think that's eminently the way it should happen. We are hamstrung by the Act insofar as we can't genuinely and honestly and openly debate these things outside of a council meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildred and Councillor Quilty. Anything in closing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will just repeat what has been said before. The proposition for tomorrow is not to ask more questions. It's true that we have plenty of opportunity to ask questions about the report that has been given, and we received our answers. It is the opportunity for us councillors to debate each and every item, to propose what we want to include and talk about it, to take out what we don't want to include and talk about it as councillors. We are prevented by the Act from doing it in the workshops and briefings. So this is really our opportunity, either this or suspend standing orders and go for till midnight or something. I also think I take on board what Officer Klein said about putting the draft up for public consultation and then perhaps taking the opportunity later on to change the budget. But I think it will only be fair to the ratepayers to see the budget, the council budget that council has already had input in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillors, are we all still on the same page? We all know where we're up to? I therefore put the motion of having a meeting tomorrow, essentially in short at 10 a.m. tomorrow. All those in favour? All those opposed? All right, as there's a tie, I'll use my casting vote to defeat the motion. So, councillors, I know Councillor Watson, you had foreshadowed a motion. What was your motion? Oh, sorry, division. Yep, so all those that were in favour, which was Councillor Mildred, Councillor Hall and Councillor Quilty. All those against, which was Councillor Watson, Councillor Simpfendorfer and Councillor Polton. Mayor defeated the motion. Councillor Watson.
Mr. Mayor, I will put the motion that was by the officer's recommendation on tonight's meeting. Thank you. And I'll wait for a second at this time. Thanks, Mr Mayor. We've heard the very passionate debate about the budget and the process of the budget, and my colleague in Councillor Mildren making sure that we follow everything via the letter of the law, which we do. And I just believe that the budget should go forward. We have had ample time. We've had good debate, or I should say, I will retract that. We've had good discussion. Officers bringing good information to us to make a decision.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
I reserve the right, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Councillors. Councillor Hall.
Look, now with this budget, I don't think it reflects the councillors' input, and therefore the community we wholly represent. As I said before, I participated in the council budget workshops. And I did ask many questions, actually, probably more than some, to clarify some of the documents throughout the budget. So, they were answered and clarified. But when it came down to what we actually want to have in and pull out, and we actually were given some modelling on different percentage rate rises that Councillor Klein offered for us to have a look at. But when it actually comes down to pulling stuff in and pulling stuff out, they are requests, and we're not allowed to do requests, and so that's why Councillor Quilty's put up this, put up that recommendation before, so we can actually debate and go through them as we feel fit. And as I'll say again, I ultimately believe this is the CEO's and the council officers' budget. I don't believe it reflects councillors' input. Thank you. I'd like to thank Narelle and your staff. You always work hard and you provide us with a great document. So I thank you and acknowledge your hard work and your staff's hard work in putting that budget together. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillor Mildren, Councillor Quilty, before anything further. Councillor Simpfendorfer, you reserved your right. I missed you, sorry, Councillor Mildren, go.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This budget's not based on conservative values and conservative economics, but rather reflects a progressive methodology. I believe it's predicated philosophically on wrong base assumptions. The draft budget is prepared by staff with no material opportunity for councillors to have a meaningful contribution. And that doesn't mean we haven't had workshops where the budget's been explained to us, and it has been explained to us and been explained exceedingly well, and I compliment Officer Klein for the work she's done and the way she's explained the budget. I think she's done an admirable job. But this is just the way things are. Under the Local Government Act, councillors cannot direct or influence staff in the preparation of a budget or any reports, and cannot make decisions outside of monthly formal council meetings. Therefore, any briefing meetings or so-called workshops are immaterial in respect to councillor influence over the content of the draft documents. Councillors may ask questions of clarification, however the CEO, acting more like a managing director, may determine the question's relevance and to expeditiously move the meeting on. I do not support the need for borrowing, do not support the need for borrowing to purchase the depot, as I believe adequate savings to cover that could be reached from operating expenditure. I see no will to seek out such savings. The South Street extension is premature to say the least. There is very little likelihood that the brass band will be rehoused this financial year, so that money is going to sit in the budget and be rolled into something else later on, where we could be reallocating it to something that we debate and discuss and put into the budget. I do not support the establishment of a significant sum for CEO consultancy fund, irrespective of the range of possible uses the CEO may have in mind. In my opinion, all significant funds should be project allocated as part of the budget, irrespective as to whether or not the elected council actually creates the content. There are several projects that I believe should have been included in the budget. There is a significant flaw in the structure of our CBD. in that it fails to create good accessibility, legibility and convenience. And indeed that fact was brought up in the consultation process for the retail strategy at the Hewans Hill Hotel last week. One major contributor to that is the poor east-west movement capability. This problem could be solved by reintroducing a right turn capability from Hume Street into Elgin Boulevard. This, in my opinion, should have been included in the budget. There is an inclusion in the budget to close off the cross-turn lane near the front of Elgin's bottle shop, which will exacerbate the east-west movement problem. I believe £1 should be provided. We've dealt with that and it's been knocked away. I believe provision for opening up access to the Wodonga Creek frontage to facilitate recreation, business and tourism opportunities rather than to continue to turn our back on the major Wodonga Creek should be included in the budget. Provisions for redesign of the major High Street, Lawrence Street, Thomas Mitchell Drive and Beechworth Road roundabout. We should be providing in budget to commence planning processes to look at how that's going to be able to deal with the growing city needs. We already know that there's enough issues emerging now. If we don't start planning that, and I say now, then we're going to have real problems on our hands as the city grows, and particularly as the population comes in from the South Leneva and Barranduda corridor. I don't know if too many people travel the route along Beechworth Road at 8:30 in the morning. It's absolutely chock-a-block with traffic, and the vast majority of that traffic is coming in and going through the roundabout. Now, we need to deal with that, and we should be allocating funds to deal with the planning process. It might take, 12 months or so to do the planning, and we should be allocating funds for that, and then look to the future to allocate infrastructure works funds to do the capital changes. I cannot in good conscience agree to put a budget out for consultation that I would prefer to see changed when council finally adopts it. I believe that would be tantamount to misleading the community. When we deal with this stuff, if we go out to the community with this budget and we believe that we want to change it when it comes back, that simply isn't the appropriate way to be going about stuff. That's not giving the community an opportunity to actually speak about and make submissions about what might end up being the budget. So I just think we're going about this all the wrong way. I don't think we've had anywhere near the level of input that is warranted in a practical and material sense, and I think it's appropriate that we either suspend standing orders and talk about it now, or I don't know what the alternative is because we've had that knocked back. So I don't think we're doing a justice to our community in any shape or form with the way we're producing this budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Just a clarification question, Acting CEO. In terms of submissions, who is able to make a submission? Is there a limitation to how many submissions a person can make? I'm getting shakes to both, but if you could clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. No, there isn't a limit on how many submissions a community member could put in. And so, yes, we can take submissions and that will be for 28 days after if this motion gets up, starting from tomorrow.
All right. Councillor Simpfendorfer, did you reserve your right? Nothing further to add. And our mover, Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think I've been in this chamber for some 15 years, and I think one of the reasons why we're in here as a councils or councillors is to show vision and strategic planning and future planning for our cities. And over my time, I've seen logic, I've seen the railway taken out of High Street, I've seen the High Street redevelopment being done, all great positive things. I've been to nearly all of the community consultations over the budget and council plan, and everyone's saying positive things that this city is moving forward. We're a centre of attraction, a centre of visiting, and I'm really chuffed to hear all those great comments because we've had some great planning and great strategies and great budgets to get us to where we are today. So with putting this budget forward and for consultation with community to put submissions in, as you've just highlighted, I believe this is a very positive and financial fiscal budget that will take us forward again, and that we've all had opportunities. I'm in High Street just about every day having coffee. I don't get approached to say negative things about our great city. I walk, as I said earlier tonight, with the dogs and in the parks and pathways. I don't get pulled up, and I think we're a positive moving forward city at the moment, and the budget reflects that. So thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All opposed? Thank you. I'll use the casting vote again, and I will use my vote to carry the motion. The Mayor's vote carries. I'm looking for a division. Thank you very much. All those in favour? Councillor Watson, Councillor Simpendorfer, Councillor Polton. All those opposed? Councillor Mildren, Councillor Quilty, Councillor Hall, and the Mayor's vote carried the motion. On to item 8.6, the Mayoral Robe and Chain Policy. I feel like I should have probably put that on tonight. Before us, we have obviously the report commences on page 62. It's pretty much carrying on from the decision last month. Hasn't cost a great deal of money for us to bring the robes up to quality cleanliness, ready for if somebody decides to bust them out in the near future. But councillors, do I have somebody prepared to move a motion? As per the recommendation, Councillor Hall. Yep, do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Hall.
Oh, look, just to add to what you said, yeah, this policy was decided at the council meeting last month, and I'm happy to say that after the council did an investigation on the mayoral robes, it has been assessed that there was no significant costs associated with the cleaning and assessment of the robe, so that would be needed. So the robe has been deemed to be in a satisfactory condition. So I'll be supporting the recommendation tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't be repeating with everything. I won't be repeating everything that Councillor Hall has said. I agree with it. I would only like to add that you will look absolutely grand in mayoral robe and chain, and I can't wait to see you as the representative of our city at the next ceremony. I hope you wear it often. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillors, any further commentary on that one? Councillor Watson.
Mr. Mayor, I've been in the chamber, as I said, on the last motion for some 15 years, and so I was post of the commissioners, the Jeff Kennett regime when they brought commissioners in, and if you look at the honour board up there, that no one's worn the robes in that time, and they occasionally mark by it, I understand, wore them a few times, but I think they're a historical, item. I hope you have your lucky socks on when you're wearing them. But I think they're a thing of the past, and we're a modern, moving forward city. And I understand all the lovely things with history and things like tradition, but I'm happy to move against it.
Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In a society that's under rapid change and all things old are new again, I think it's really important that we maintain some ceremonial structure and ceremonial attributes that lead one generation into the next and allow all sorts of options and things available for maintaining the structures that keep our society together. I think there's quite a number of places and opportunities for the likes of local government to maintain ceremony, to be part of the glue that holds the city and holds the community together. I recognise that former councillor Mark Byatt, when he was mayor, wore the chains with most of the citizenship ceremonies when he did it, and I understand the significance of that to the people that actually received citizenship on his watch. So I think it's appropriate that we maintain the capability, even if it's left up to the individual mayor of the day to make decisions. I think keeping ceremonial connection is very important for our social fabric. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Simpendorfer, no. Councillor Hall, in closing?
No, I have nothing to add. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. And councillors, just before I put the motion, I'd like to point out, I think the chains were made in 1830 or 46, so they've got quite some historical significance. I would be more than happy, through peer pressure, councillors, to figure out, if I can figure out who knows how to put a robe on and how to untangle the chains, and we could possibly look at that at the next ceremonious occasion or council meetings. That's also in the policy. All those in, I've put the motion, all those in favour? Hey, carried unanimously. It's almost a round of applause from the gallery there. 8.7, the review of the Australia Day Citizenship Awards guidelines. Obviously, something that we take pride in delivering each year to the community, and it's good to see how people hold their friends and family and colleagues in high esteem. But the officer recommendations on page 67, but I do know Councillor Watson had circulated, but Councillor Mildren, go.
Mr Mayor, question. Having had a quick look, it seems that the committee that has been established to previously made decisions and is now recommended to be an advisory committee actually has never been formally put in place. If that, I guess I'm asking the question as to whether we know that that's happened somewhere where I couldn't find the answer to.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would have to take that on notice, Councillor Mildren, but my understanding is that is correct. But I would have to follow up and just make sure that I'm giving you the correct information.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In light of that, I'd suggest that we probably could, without assuming the majority chooses to support, I'd suggest we should consider actually formally putting that committee in place. Now, I'm conscious of the fact that Councillor Watson's got an additional motion, and I'm not sure how we deal with all that, but...
Through you, Mr Mayor, the committee is in place, so it was endorsed at the November council meeting. Is that correct?
Well, Councillor Watson is
The rep.
No, you're right, with all the other committees.
Yeah.
when we do committee appointments.
Yeah. Okay, so we've clarified that it is, in fact, a formally recognised and formed committee, which was when we allocated councillors to different committees that represent the City of Wodonga on different parts. So that's in there back in November, Councillor Mildren, from what we've discovered.
Sorry, the Australia Day committee I saw, but the committee to determine didn't appear, or I didn't find it. Well, that's the policy reads.
And then we're appointing.
So the committee, as I understand it, Councillor Mildren, would relate to the guidelines which have been in place for a number of years. The guidelines recognise that committee. It involves the Mayor and a council representative. So in this case, at the November council meeting, the council selected, I believe, Councillor Watson to that committee.
Sorry, I think there's two different committees we're talking about. When you read it, it seems to be a separate committee established to make the decisions under the guidelines to the actual Australia Day, because it asks for the chair of the Australia Day committee to be appointed to the other committee. So I think there's two committees, and I couldn't find the establishment of the second committee.
Okay, just so those that haven't heard all that conversation, what we're going to do is Councillor Watson had foreshadowed a motion in terms of something he'd like included in that policy. Councillor Mildren, you've picked up a very good point. So the Governance Officer has suggested that we include that in the motion. So Councillor Watson, if you'd like to read your motion as you've got it, and then we'll add I don't know how many points you've got, but a second, third, fourth point if we need to cover the establishment of a committee each year for the Australia Day Awards.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So, and I thank for the opportunity to be able to put this forward. Point one, the Australia Day Citizen Awards guidelines, as attached, as amended to allow current or past council staff to be eligible for an award. And point two, the Australia Day Citizen Awards guidelines, as amended as part of one above, to be adopted. And we're probably most likely, after hearing from Councillor Mildred in formalising point three, is that the whatever words you'd like to put there, Kevin, is to adopt the function, probably it's the function of the Australia Day Committee for.
A selection panel be established in accordance with the guidelines.
Perhaps we should just say an Australia Day Awards Advisory Committee be established comprising the Mayor, Chair of the Australia Day Committee, the CEO or nominee, and the immediate past award recipients of the Citizens and Young Citizens of the Year.
I'm happy to take that. Governance Officer, happy to add that as point three. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Quilty, thank you very much. Councillor Watson, did you want to explain further?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. One of the things we do have each year, and I've been on this committee on and off for a number of years, and we do find it hard to get good candidates or good nominations to come forward. Just within, and we've neglected or it hasn't been allowed to have past staff members or current staff members, and I'm thinking more of our volunteer or casual staff in the sense of an example would be the crossing supervisor who just do a few hours a week for us and is not on a large part of our workforce, but are part of our workforce, but can be involved in lots of other community and voluntary roles in our city. So I'm really sort of making it so it's we might bring more candidates to the table because we have very committed and passionate people that work for our city on a casual basis, but also volunteer in our city. So I just think it's another way of getting some more people to be used to put in the acknowledgements of the betterment of our community.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Quilty. Nothing to add. Other councillors? Councillor Hall.
I don't have an issue as such, but because you've explained, Councillor Watson's explained, that he's looking at mainly volunteers or, people that do sort of, part-time work and volunteer elsewhere. But it just concerns me because it doesn't clarify that in the actual motion that, I suppose we're going to have to rely on the committee to make that choice. But, we're not putting up prior mayors and prior councillors or even, officers that work for the council who actually get paid to do their job. And so there needs to be a bit mindful around people that are actually paid to do the job and with that award, I think. That's just my view.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillors. Going to Councillor Watson in closing.
I really take on board what Councillor Hall said. I think that's always a concern that in these sorts of great awards that are bestowed upon our community and our citizens, and I think that the committee has that always in the back of their mind, and the guidelines also will help direct that as well. So, it goes past a open community as been put in the motion tonight. So I'm pretty sure that will cover that off. But it's actually getting more awareness and more people who can put their hand up. And I like to think that they're nominated without knowledge of their nomination as well. So, so I'll put the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillors, I put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 8.8, the draft revenue and rating plan for 2021 to 2022 to 2024 to 2025. The report presents the draft revenue and rating plan for public exhibition. There's an officer recommendation on page 73. Would somebody like to move a motion? Okay, yep. What have you got for us, Councillor Quilty?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my alternative motion is that the draft Wodonga Council Revenue and Rating Plan 2021-2022 to 2024-2025 be approved for public exhibition for 28 days, and that an advisory committee be appointed by resolution of the council and the rating strategy be reviewed within 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Mildren. Thank you. Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wodonga Council rating structure comprises 10 differential rates as per page 85 of the agenda. I won't repeat that. The formula to calculate the general rates is capital improved value multiplied by those differential rate types. I know we have a deadline to have the rating strategy in place, so hence the first part of my recommendation. However, I believe that the advisory group was run by previous council, and I believe that the current council should have the opportunity to make input in their rating strategy and have the benefit of using it. And the next council may have different agendas, different plans, and different conditions they work with, and they should be afforded the opportunity, should they choose to do so, to come up with a rating strategy. Now, why I want to, as a councillor, want to revisit the rating strategy. As I said, the rating strategy relies on capital improved value, and I'm not a great believer in capital improved value, despite the many advantages that have been pointed out in the report. I believe capital improved value is a way of taxing wealth and the way to ensure that those who have the money and can afford to pay will pay. Councillors, I know it's late and people want to go home, but I will entertain you with a tiny little piece of Russian history. Visitors to Russia would have visited the beautiful town of St. Petersburg, established by the Emperor Peter I, aka Peter the Great. Peter the Great had an ambition to transform the entire Russia into a European country, also running some wars, and obviously needed some money. In late 17th century, this emperor introduced beard tax. Beard tax afforded the right to wear a beard. People were charged differently for the right to wear a beard. Wealthy merchants were charged 100 rubles. Military and imperial court were charged 60 rubles. Ordinary citizens were charged 30 rubles, and any peasants entering a city were charged some small change every time they entered the city. Finally, the beards of those who paid more didn't grow any better and weren't any longer than of those who paid less. That's 17th century. In the 21st century, I believe we must endeavor to come up with a rating strategy that will facilitate the development of industry and commerce in our city, not with a rating strategy that makes sure that the rates are paid by those who can afford. I believe that this work should be done in time for the current council to work with it. The next council, as I said, may have different conditions and different priorities to work with. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Mildren.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Reserve.
Thank you. Reserve the right, councillors. Councillor Senfendorfer.
Just a clarification point, please, Mr. Mayor. I noticed below the recommendation, the attachments was the 2018 report of the rating strategy reference group. That, from my understanding, had members of the public and some councillors on it. Is that similar to what we're considering here? Or just a clarification on... Yep. So is that strategy reference group in place as a matter of course, or is this no?
Through you, Mr Mayor, a new rating strategy committee would need to be endorsed. So we would advertise that out, go through the process of getting people to nominate for that committee.
Councillors? Councillor Watson.
Mr Mayor, if it isn't successful, I'll foreshadow.
Councillor Hall.
Okay, look, I'm just going to support this. It's a new idea, and I'm always up for new ideas and how we can do things differently. I was on the last rating strategy committee, and we did go through everything, and we basically probably followed up just from the committee before that. We did change one or two things. And I think as a new council, it's probably not a bad thing to have another rating strategy going forward, and it gives them the new councillors or new council an opportunity to have a look at what comes up, and especially new ideas. I'm all for it. So.
Quick question, if I can. Narelle Klein, Director of Finance and Systems, because I know this probably falls into your portfolio. I understand there's some Act changes that's enforced this to be relevant by a certain period of time, the end of June. Substantial body of work, I know. The timelines of which we're permitted in the new Act, is there a limitation to how often we can revisit them?
Through you, Mr Mayor. So the new Act requires a new revenue and rating plan to be adopted by a council by the 30th of June following an election year. So a new council has, from the minute they get in the door, they've got about 7 months before this needs to be adopted. The state government's guidelines on best practice with rating strategies indicates that going through a deliberative engagement process where we educate the community as well as councillors is best practice, but that process takes between 6 to 12 months to undertake. When we did the last rating strategy reference group, from the time that we brought up the terms of reference to the time we actually adopted the new rating strategy was probably about 10 or 11 months. So it is a lengthy process, it is resource intensive, and it's a big commitment of time from our community members who offer their services to council for no charge. There's a lot of reading involved, as I'm sure Councillor Hall will attest to. So that time frame we've got with the new Act now doesn't allow for that consultative process to take place for the new council. In the report, I indicated that as a next best practice to what that best practice would be is that the current council, in its last term of council, would undertake a rating strategy reference group along the same lines as we did with Councillor Hall's participation back in 2018-19, and that reference group would prepare a report to the council that would be presented to the new council so that they could take that into account when we're putting together the next revenue and rating plan. So the current rating strategy that we have in place that was adopted by council back in 2019 was for a 4-year period. So it still is current and it isn't due for review just yet. What I'm proposing is maybe give it an extra year and then review it so that that report can be taken into account by the new council and that it's current and relevant at that point in time for them.
Thank you for clarifying my question, Narelle. Councillor Meldrum, sorry, Councillor, just before, because I know you reserved your right, Councillor Meldrum, was Councillors any other? Oh, Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Very quickly, I want to support the motion. I think it makes sense, and the only consideration for me is the legislative requirements. So otherwise, I think it's good practice.
Councillor Meldrum.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There's quite a few reasons why I think this motion should be supported, not least of which is the Andrews State Government has significantly changed things. Even though you might look at the Local Government Act and the way things are done, there's some substantial changes probably coming in guidelines and ministerial directives, or whatever the terminology might be, to apply to the stuff that comes out from the state government in regard to these things. But there is some changes that are quite significant, and as a result of some of those changes, I think it's really prudent that we actually go and review the way we put our rates and other revenue charges together, how we underpin it, what we do with it, because in essence, the state government now regards rates as a taxation, not as has long been held. Rates were a payment for a service. But now the way the state government's producing all the documentation and everything else that comes with it, it's regarding rates as a taxation. So in recent years, state government has taken over the valuation of land process upon which a rate's determined. They've established rates clearly as a tax. The next step will likely be for the State Revenue Office to take over the collection of rates and make transfer payment decisions about the allocation of funds. So if we've got good policies in place, we'll be in a strong position, or at least that's what we should be if we go through this process correctly. So I think it's prudent. I'm happy to support that we adopt the policy now, because we have to adopt it to meet the statutory requirements, but that we prudently, without too much delay, commence a review and do that review in light of the changes in the rules, the changes in the way that we might be able to undertake our rate collection in a different way. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Milton. Just before I get you to close, Councillor Quilty, Director Klein, Finance and Systems, can you bring it forward the extra year? Or so my understanding that the 4-year cycle would mean that we're sort of currently in one of those, and then you'd have to be at a reset point to go for the next year planning. And I'm thinking if it takes 12 months anyway, even if we started the process now, you could afford yourself more time. But I know it's a body of work, so if you could just clarify the requirement for me, that'd be great.
So the new Act says that Council must prepare and adopt a revenue and rating plan for a period of at least 4 financial years. So in doing the motion that's been put forward, we're declaring that we're adopting the revenue and rating plan, but we're not actually going to have it in place for 4 years. So I would not see that as being fully compliant with the Act. Others may interpret it slightly differently, but the Act does specifically say for a period of at least 4 financial years, which would leave it to be sitting with the new council within that period from election to 30th of June as to when the timing for updating that plan would fall.
So sorry, just picking up on what you said there, does this create a compliance issue in supporting this motion?
That would be my interpretation, that it would, yes.
Thank you, Narelle. Councillor Quilty to close.
I think we should have a conversation about that, because I don't hold the same view. The position in the Act is arching rather than requiring, and I think we could do it as many times as we liked, so long as we didn't exceed the 4-year process or didn't beat the 4-year process. We can do it every second week if we wanted to. Not that I'm suggesting you should do that, but I don't accept that the way the Act's written, that it says you can't go back and review the policy at any time you like. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. In closing, Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I was just going to say what Councillor Mildren said. The Act, my interpretation of the Act, it doesn't say the minimum of 4 years. It says at least 4 years. I'm not a lawyer, so my interpretation could be wrong, but I believe at least 4 years means it can be done earlier, but it can be done later. I would also like to emphasize that first part of my motion was as per current recommendation, so that to make sure that we do meet the deadline. I see the value in reviewing the strategy in time for us to use it, because it will give us the benefits of using it, whatever we come up with, and obviously the public consultation, hopefully, and the reference group. We'll see the outcomes of a new rating strategy should it be adopted in our tenure. I take on board Officer Klein's comment that it's a resource-intensive process. However, we are going to undertake this process anyway, as recommended in the report, just a bit later at the very end of our tenure rather than a bit sooner. So the question of resources is, while relevant overall, is not relevant for taking this division of moving, taking this motion of either moving it up or not moving it up. The expense is going to be incurred if we're going to do it. It's just going to be in our fourth year, not second year or whatever. Thank you.
Councillor Quilty, just so before I put the motion, oh, sorry, Councillor Watson, sorry.
Point of clarification, I just asked Councillor Quilty just to read back what we'll be voting on. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, as per Councillor Watson, Councillor Quilty, that's what I was going to ask you to do before closing, or before putting the motion.
So the motion is that the draft Wodonga Council Revenue and Rating Plan 21-22 to 24-25 be approved for public exhibition for 28 days. That a rating strategy reference group be appointed by a resolution of the council, and the rating strategy be reviewed within 12 months.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. I'll therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Motion was carried 4-2. On to item 8.9, the road management plan. Must be reviewed during the same period as the council plan preparation, folks. This report proposes that the plan go on public exhibition for 28 days. There's a recommendation on page 190, councillors. Can I get somebody with a motion? Thank you, Councillor Watson in moving. Seconder, thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Watson.
I think this is pretty self-explanatory and it will go out for the 28 days, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer.
I'll reserve, Mr Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. No takers. Oh. Councillor Simpfendorfer, you've reserved your right. Nothing to add. Councillor Watson, closing. Nothing to add. I'll therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All opposed? Absolutely none. So we're carried unanimously. 8.10, for those playing along at home, the tender for the manufacture and installation and supply of signage. This is a fairly straightforward report. The recommendation of the officers on page 229, councillors. Do I have somebody to move a motion? Watson, I think, was quick. Second to Simpfendorfer, is that right, Graham? Yep. Thank you, Councillor Watson.
Mr Mayor, it's very pleasing to see a local supplier will, if this is successful, wins their contract. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Simpfendorfer.
No, nothing further, thank you.
Councillors, Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A little bit of levity for the evening. When I was at school a very, very long time ago, my English teacher said there is no such word as signage. Just a sign or signs. How standards have changed.
I would like to point out a lot's changed in that time, Councillor Mildren. Councillors, any further to add? Anything in closing, Councillor Watson? No? All right, I'll therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 8.11, I have two conflicts of interest, Councillor Mildren and Councillor Watson. Councillor Mildren, if you could go first, thanks.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My conflict is that I own land in proximity to the site, so thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Watson.
Mr Mayor, I have a general conflict of interest as I have located on my property on Hewins Hill both a Telstra tower that I have received rent and also from North East Water also receiving rent and also manages my telecommunications second tower. I have a conflict of general nature.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. And just while we wait for Councillor Watson to leave, I'd like to thank those that have joined us tonight on this specific topic, and thank you for being patient for us to get through to your item. Are they both gone? All right. Acting CEO, I just want you to acknowledge a letter, if you could, thanks.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to note that separately, councillors have all received correspondence of the 10th of May from objectors and correspondence of the 12th of May from Telstra. Both of these letters, while not altering the officer's report, will form part of the official council record and be incorporated into the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yes, 8.11, I did forget to give the description, the Donnington Drive, Wodonga, use and development of a telecommunications facility and native vegetation removal. So this is seeking resolution to the issue of a notice of decision to grant a permit for the telecommunications facility. Councillors, there's an officer recommendation on page 234. Would somebody like to move a motion? Councillor Simpfendorfer, is it as per the recommendation?
Mr Mayor, it is. I wish to move it as per the recommendation for the purpose of debate.
Thank you. And seconder, councillors? Thank you, Councillor Hall. Was that for purpose of debate? All right. Councillor Simpfendorfer, fire away.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. The first point I'd like to clarify through you, Mr Mayor, is what impacts, if any, would there be if this decision tonight is delayed for some purposes or some reasons or further discussion that may be required to satisfy all members of the community? What consequences or what outcomes are affected if we to push to delay it?
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Through Acting CEO. Leon Schultz, the Director for Planning and Infrastructure. I'll know them off by heart by the end of my tenure.
Mr Mayor, through you, Councillor Simpfendorfer, the obligations of the council are to assess and determine a planning permit application that is placed before them. There's also a requirement for the responsible authority, being the local council, to determine that application within a statutory period of 60 days. If that application is not determined within that 60-day statutory period, the applicant, in this case Telstra, have an option of having the matter reviewed at VCAT for a non-determination by the responsible authority. In the event that that occurs, and in the event that the VCAT find in favour of the applicant, costs will be it's potential that costs will be carried by the council. Depending on the nature of the case, be it a major case or a minor case at VCAT, those costs could be a one-off fee of $3,500 and $3,500 for each day of the hearing thereafter. And my staff have advised that it is potentially a 3-day hearing that may well take place when the case is heard by VCAT. So it would certainly be our recommendation that the matter be considered at this council meeting and not be deferred in the event that Telstra have it reviewed at VCAT or make an application for the review at VCAT in the ensuing days.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Simpfendorfer, hopefully that answered your question, but obviously you moved, so fire away.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. It's obviously very topical and has been for some time. I understand it's been going on for a number of years before my time. It's really difficult, having read all the information that's been provided in what the recommendation is, very comprehensive, and also taking on the emails and reports that have come through, and the petition, I think, is the correct word, from members of our community that are probably mostly affected in that immediate vicinity. I note that the petition highlighted a number of issues, being the visual impacts, the environmental impacts, decrease in land values, excuse me, and health impacts among some of them. And having read through that, it's my understanding, unfortunately, as difficult as that is, to make an assessment, is that some of those aspects or those themes aren't or cannot be taken into account. There's concerns about notification and the timeliness of it that's been raised, and that's certainly been factored in part of this decision. But again, it's putting a motion forward on merits based as to whether this would be and complies with what the Act says and complies with what is required under a planning permit versus the moral obligations and I guess the conjecture that comes with any Telstra towers or any towers that are affecting us, and it's that balance of what services our community invest and what impacts on those in the immediate vicinity. So it's been quite problematic. I appreciate everyone's opinion, and this unfortunately can be one of those ones that's going to not keep everyone happy. But our job here tonight is to make a decision as per what the planning permit is and whether it complies with the Acts or not. So based as is, I would have to support the recommendation on the advice from what we have from our appropriate officers. Unfortunately, I wish we could do more, or could say more, but with the time constraints that we have, and part of the, I guess, community consultation that has gone to and fro, would like to have seen this negotiate further. But unfortunately, we find ourselves in this position where we need to vote on it tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Hall.
Yeah, look, just knowing about the time constraints is an issue. I mean, I would have liked to maybe have delayed it, but because of those reasons, it makes it a little bit impossible. It's one of those decisions it's hard to make for a councillor at times because you want the best outcome for the people you represent, and no one will argue that better phone and internet coverage for a majority of our residents is vitally important. Where the infrastructure goes can be met with problematic issues. Ideally, this infrastructure should go in areas where there'd be little impact on the environment, local residents, where accessibility is relatively easy. The Donnington Drive, Bez Hill identification placement for this new infrastructure is one of those areas where you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. I have asked the council if there was another place where this tower could go. It was the first thing I asked because, you know, like if there is a possibility where it could go in a more acceptable place, you know, that's, of course, I think the council would want to do that. And I'm told that, you know, that there were other areas looked at and assessments were done, and there were issues with the other sites identified, and the coverage was not adequate enough to provide what is needed in the community. And I later had a phone call from a concerned resident, and they told me they had investigated those possible sites and supposedly that were looked at, and they found that they were actually when they rang around that there hadn't been asked or assessed by Telstra for being possible sites. So there's a bit of conflicting information getting around. I really do hope the due process was done here because that's something I really do stand by. So I really do hope that Telstra have done the due process. But getting back to the decision around the phone and internet coverage, it's been an ongoing issue in Wodonga for a long time, especially also in the northeast. You know, I know a lot of people that, even myself, I have issues where I live, so it is a problem. And also the fact that it meets this permit meets most of the planning, all the planning scheme, Wodonga planning scheme requirements. And in doing so, it makes it very hard to fight against it at VCAT. You know, I think at the end of the day, we'll probably be fighting a losing case, and it's not something that you really want council to have to do when you know the outcome's probably going to be that we wouldn't win. And I've been advised by other people that have fought these cases, and the outcomes generally that this infrastructure is required, and they lose the case. So and it's been fought for all the reasons that have been listed. So sadly, I'm going to have to support the recommendation tonight.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillor Quilty?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have very little to say to what has already been said. I take on board the concerns of everyone involved. I'm a great believer of property owners to say what happens to their property. Unfortunately, here is not the case. I am concerned about us here tonight being just a step, and should we not support the recommendation, I understand it's very likely that it will go to VCAT and very unlikely to win. So I really don't want to be sitting here tonight, but I will be supporting the recommendation.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Simpfendorfer, in close, anything extra? Therefore, put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 8.12, councillors, do you need a second just to make sure you're on the, or you left it ready to go? The 965 Castle Creek or Castle Creek Road, road deviation and also transfer of land. There is a recommendation on page 312, councillors. This is just fixing up some bits and pieces. Would somebody like to move a motion? Thank you. As per the recommendation, Councillor Simpfendorfer, do I have thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Mr. Mayor, I think the recommendation, as has been explained, is quite comprehensive. It's some issues there over that deviation that's required, so I think it pretty much speaks for itself. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Look, I don't have an issue with this realignment and recommendation here. It sort of makes sense, so yeah, I'll be supporting it.
Councillors? No, all in, therefore, sorry, Councillor Simpfendorfer, anything to close? No. I put the motion, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 9, councillors, is, it's almost quiet in here now. Item 9 is obviously reports for noting. 9.1 is the VEC, so the Victorian Electoral Commission report for 2020 Wodonga Council elections. There's an officer recommendation on page 320 to essentially table that report. Councillors, would somebody like to move? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Hall, you had your hand up, so happy to second. Does anybody wish to speak against the motion? No? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 10. As always, I'll speed through it. I'll get the month right this time around, though, unlike last month. I'll go through the reports. If you want to pick up and note anything in there, councillors, please feel free to jump in and pull me up. 10.1 is the finance report for April 2021. Hang on. We'll get there. Thank you for the forewarning. Planning report for April 2021 at 10.2. 10.3, the building report for April 2021. Councillor Watson.
I'd just like to make note of the building permit values. They've jumped, and the permits have jumped up like to 400. So that's very pleasing to see in our city and the growth and going forward, Mr. Mayor. The 10.4 competitive services report for April 2021, the Council Plan and LGPRF progress report for 10.5, no, 10 record of council, hang on, 10.5 record of councillor meetings. I've got two 10.5s on my cheat sheet, sorry guys. Nothing there, but at the decisions register, Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got two questions in relation to two of the items. One of them, the Gateway Island Commonwealth land matter, says that there was a report due to go to the May meeting. Can we just what happened there that we didn't get a report. And the second one is there any, like, brief, not into the detail, update as to what's happened with the sale of land to Reapers funds at Whites Road?
Thank you, Acting CEO.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, the Reapers, the sale of land to Reapers, Lot 2, I would have to take that on notice and follow that up. I can do that in the morning and get back to you if that's acceptable. And I'll, if I could ask Officer Schultz to talk about the Gateway Island.
Through you, Mr Mayor, Councillor Mildren, I will claim a typo in the update. That report was delayed. I wasn't quite happy with the advice that we received regarding royalties below 15.24, and I needed to get some clarification on that matter. It is scheduled to go to the executive next week, and it will come up to the June meeting. Yeah, apologies for that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Director Schultz and Councillor Mildren. Item 11, the notices of motion of which there are none. Councillor Mildren.
In respect to the notices of motion, I believe a notice of motion was submitted to the CEO but rejected. So a notice of motion was received, but it's not been noted, and I think the proper process should have been that it should have been noted, even if it was rejected. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Governance Officer Kevin Scully will work his way through that one and we'll note that. Should that be required in the governance rules? Or from best practice? We'll do some homework on that one and work on that.
Well, the words in the agenda say there were none received. Well, that's not accurate. So, yeah.
Point taken, definitely. Item 12. Item 12 is petitions, of which there are none. Item 13, the Council Common Seal, of which there are none. General business, councillors, at item 14. Now, Councillor Watson, I know you had some, and please, once we're finished with Councillor Watson, councillors, if you want to raise your hand, we'll get yours.
Mr Mayor, just recently, we know Elgin's and the Wetherall family have sold their business, but I'd like to acknowledge that Beth and then Tom, in the early 70s, had the steak pit, and it was probably one of our most premier restaurants in Albury, Wodonga, and probably the region. And to acknowledge them of that great service. And then they had a place called the Carvery in the same building or same business. And, you know, I know many families went there at the celebrations, and it was a fantastic place of culinary delight. So I acknowledge the Wetherall family's commitment to our city, and it's fantastic. And then the second one is probably next door to them now is the, no one's noticed, but the quarter, the ballards are going up for the Criterion Group to start building on both the pool side and probably the old police and court site. So it's really pleasing to see that starting to take shape, and that we can see the name up there now called the quarter. So they're the two pieces of general business I had, but particularly the Wetherall family, what they, in that culinary expertise they did was fantastic for our city.
I think we'd almost have a here over that one, especially the steak. Damn good steak. Councillors, anybody else with general business? If I can indulge just in some for a moment, obviously we've reflected on this a couple of times tonight where people have identified National Volunteer Week. A little later this week you'll see members of our community, the City of Wodonga, but also some that have done work across both the two cities, one community, obviously through a combination between Albury City Mayor Kevin Mack and myself. There'll be an award presented. They will be announced, I'm pretty certain, on Wednesday, if I'm correct, but by Thursday morning the public will be able to see who has been recognised for their service to our community this year, so that's quite exciting. And I thought it'd be a timely reminder, especially after we've spoken about the Wodonga Dog Rescue and what have you, and the return to volunteering, but not necessarily the return to volunteering post-COVID, because I know pretty much every councillor and potentially every officer in the room at the moment has at some point in time volunteered towards the cause. But if I can indulge in saying that we as community leaders need to encourage as much of that as possible. to really help our community thrive. We need to be talking to all generations around that, because it is, as we all know, if you've been part of a sporting club, it's always left to the same one or two people, same as any sort of facility. But, you know, just tonight, think of it this week of, you know, who you know that already does a good job, but also those that have good skill sets that could almost effortlessly help sectors of our community that are screaming out for volunteers. And just another one around engagement, because I know tonight that's come up quite a few times around our council plan process and the budgetary process. Again, it's up to us as councillors to make sure that our community know that they can pick up the phone and ring us any day of the week, any night. We're not on call. We don't, as councillors, sit there by the phone waiting for someone to ring us, but we're able to be engaged with, and we can point them in the right direction. And again, just highlighting those couple of items tonight that will be out for 28 days of submissions, essentially, from the community. So I encourage anyone in the community that's watching now or has been present tonight to make sure they provide feedback on the documents that are out there for public consumption. If there's no further general business, we'll move on to item 15, urgent business. There is none, but item 16, question time. I know we've got one. Did we just end up with the one, Acting CEO? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you, Mr Mayor. We have a question from Mr Bart Citron. His question to Council is, under Council's youth engagement statement, in which it aims to engage young people in projects that are authentic and provide real-world context for learning where the voice of young people is heard and acted upon, has it considered establishing a youth environmental or climate committee? If not, will it consider establishing a youth committee to address this urgent need? Our response is thank you to Mr Citron for the question in relation to engaging young people in environmental and climate projects. We have recently applied for a small amount of grant funding to partner with Indigo Shire's Youth for Climate Action Group and other local councils to provide our young people with the opportunity to take part in a Youth in Politics camp, which amongst other topics will cover addressing action for the climate. Starting in July, we'll be commencing a youth leadership and development program, which will run through the second half of 2021. Again, amongst other topics, this program will build leadership skills, allow our youth to learn how to lead, collaborate and advocate for what they want to see change in their communities. Wodonga Council has an agriculture, environmental and sustainability focus through its Young Achievers scheme and an environmental sustainability category in its Community Impact Grant program. We encourage the youth of Wodonga to work with the Council's grant officer or youth services officer if they feel there's an opportunity they wish to pursue to progress action on climate change or environmental sustainability. We'll ensure Mr Citron receives a copy of our response in the next couple of days.
Thank you, Acting CEO, and obviously all councillors were given a copy of that letter and also the response to. Yes, Councillor Mildren.
Question, Mr Mayor. I wasn't aware of some of these things in detail. Have these decisions to get involvement with Indigo's Youth for Climate Action Group been a council decision, or are they decisions at officer level? How have they been made? And the leadership and development program, is that something that I'm not sure how is that again something that's been by resolution of council or by officer level?
Through Mr Mayor, if I could ask Officer Hogg to reply. Youth Services is in her area and she'll have the answer, I'm sure. Thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, both of those programs have been designed at a programming level with officers, and the leadership one in particular is being funded through youth engagement funding. So that funding is external to council, but it is being developed with officers and some other expertise as well.
Thank you, Director Hogg. Item 17, confidential business, of which councillors there is none. Item 18, no confidential urgent business. Therefore, I declare May's meeting closed at 8:24 p.m. Thank you, councillors, executive, and to those that attended and tuned in this evening.